Welcome to the Contrarians, where we are right and you are wrong. I'm Julio.
And I'm Alex. Here on the show, we rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. For the first half of each episode, Contrarians Corner, we trash the fresh red tomatoes and praise the rotten green splotches, making our case any way we can.
The aptly titled Real Talk serves as the second half of each episode. This is where we discuss our true feelings on the movie we're covering. For more information on our podcast and to browse past episodes, you can head over to our website, wearethecontrarians.com.
From there, you can also access our Patreon and merchandise, because capitalism.
If you enjoy our attempts at comedic film discussions, we encourage you to subscribe and leave us a review on whatever podcatcher you use.
If you'd like to reach out to us directly, that's what social media is for. You can find us on most platforms as @ContrarianPrime.
You can also see what we look like if you go to youtube.com/@ContrarianPrime, and you can contact us by email at wearethecontrarians@gmail.com.
I think that covers it.
Then it's time for the podcast. And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for Star Trek, the motion picture, the director's edition.
Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, joined as always by my Peruvian counterpart, Julio. Julio, once again, we wander to the final frontier. I suppose at this point, we're just eventually going to have to cover all the Star Trek films. But as far as main timeline goes, do we just do this and five?
And then the J.J. Abrams, the first one. The real one.
And then over on our Patreon, we've had discussions about Wrath of Khan, Into Darkness, and beyond. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of these movies, but we're making a dent so far. Which is the one in San Francisco?
It's 4.
I'm pretty sure it's part 2.
Yeah, well, it depends on who you ask.
But Julio, we're not alone. We have some returning guests. I guess they've extended their bridge. We're walking over to figure out exactly what's going on here.
Yeah, part of our crew died in a transporter accident, so we're bringing in replacements.
I mean, shit, it's far away from everywhere in the world, so we'd have to hit hyperspeed to get over to Australia. But they're back, and they're back together for the first time on here, but they've both individually made appearances, correct? Am I right in that?
Okay. Yes. Welcome back, Ryan and Rachel. Ryan has been with us with a whole bunch of weird movies. Have we ever done, Ryan, a mainstream movie with you here on the show? Was it always like kind of like an out of left field pick?
Does Oscar not count as a mainstream movie? Like it's just a standard studio comedy.
Sylvester Stallone comedy.
Yeah, it's directed by John Landis. Like it's a studio comedy film. You know, it's like saying Old School is not a traditional comedy film. You know, like I don't know what you mean. You know, like it's.
I can see how Oscar and Old School are in the same universe.
They're from different eras, but you know, I mean, like just standard studio comedy. You know, I don't know what that's a normal movie. Like the Neon Demon is directed by one of the like big directors. Like I don't know what you want. Like we haven't done any art films on here. You know, like I haven't sat down and made you like watch The Holy Mountain or something.
I know, but I always feel like if it's a movie, a Ryan movie, it's a movie that we start telling people about it, and it's just.
You're right.
The conversation is like very convoluted because you have to explain and do disclaimers and, you know, provide context and all that stuff.
It's time to watch Bad Boy Bubby, everyone. We're ready to go.
Yes.
Time to get confessions on.
Yeah. Rachel, on the other hand, I think Waitress is a little more accessible. And that was the one episode that we had Rachel on for. And it was great. It was a movie that I thought I liked a lot. And then by the end of the episode, I liked it a little less, which is not something that happens often. So
I have a weird trophy when it comes to the Contrarian podcast.
Yes. And now you're together like you are every, you know, episode of your show. You're from Yum Yum Pot specifically. And you mostly... I don't know. At this point, would it be fair to still say that you mostly talk about Star Trek, or has it been like long enough since you
it's just sci-fi in general now. We started out with Star Trek Discovery because Ryan was obsessed with how bad it was.
No, incorrect. I was fascinated by the choices it made, but we both loved the absurdity of the line yum yum, which is where the name of the podcast comes from. Julio, how about you explain it for everyone out there? You remember the line. You're a fan of Star Trek Discovery, hence you finished it all, right?
Not yet. I'm savoring it.
That's it.
Just parsing it out.
You don't want it to end.
Yes. Yum Yum Pod. Alex, I don't know if I've ever told you, but we might have talked about it off mic. It's the season finale of the second season. And there's a character. They're about to chase one of the main bad guys in this climatic sequence. And one of the characters turns to the other character and goes something like, "Let's go get him." And the second character just says, "Yum yum." And it's really bad. Like, there's no way of making it sound good. Like, the best thing you can say about it is that, well, you certainly haven't seen something like that before, or not often. And it's memorable. It's so memorable that apparently it inspired Ryan and Rachel to name their show after it.
That's right. We Yum Yum Podcast because of that brave line. Now, Julio didn't outline that the character that asked the question of like, "Hey, do you want to go kill this guy?" was played by Michelle Yeoh, who literally, as soon as she stopped being on Star Trek Discovery, went on to win an Academy Award. The first thing she did after she left the show was win an Academy Award. Very, very good on her. I'm very proud of her for that. Too bad she was in Star Trek Discovery and it halted her from doing that earlier. But yeah, the line yum yum means so much to us, but we started out doing episode breakdowns of Star Trek Discovery, and then when we ran out of Star Trek Discovery, we moved on to Babylon 5, Space Above and Beyond, and currently we are watching The Expanse for the first ever time. The Expanse was a sci-fi series that was quite beloved and big and heralded, but had some struggles along the way. It was on Sci-Fi, and then that got canceled. Then it got canceled. Then it moved to Amazon, and then Jeff Bezos was like, "We don't have enough money for the Sci-Fi show. Oh no!" And it's like, if he's saying they don't have enough money, what does that mean? But that show we're having a grand time with. There's a lot of fun characters, familiar faces. Thomas Jane was a lead actor of that show for quite some time, and believe it or not, I know you two are going to be shocked to hear this. He plays a little bit of a freak, a little bit of a weirdo.
Yeah, I didn't know that Thomas Jane had been in a sci-fi show until I saw you guys were covering The Expanse and kept name dropping him. That is also a show that I had no idea had lasted that long. I thought it was another one and done, and then I kept seeing you guys covering more and more episodes. So apparently not.
No, it's one of the most heralded and celebrated modern science fiction television shows based on a long-running book series that has 9 books in total. So they got through 6 of them, and then they ran out of money. So it is what it is, but we're happy to be back with you guys here together. Rachel and I were like, what can we do with the Contrarians? We've been on them apart, but what can we do together? And I thought, well, there's only one movie that I think that we all really want to talk about. Everyone's favorite Star Trek film.
No, not Wrath of Khan, but rather Star Trek, the motion picture. It makes perfect sense to have you two for a Star Trek episode to begin with, but specifically this one. And I know I've mentioned it before, and we'll go into it definitely more when we get to real talk, but just I watched this according to my Letterboxd 4 years ago, and posted my review, and it prompted a response from Ryan, and we went back and forth for a while on Letterboxd, which, you know, that's not the best avenue to have a conversation that goes on for a while. And it's funny because at some point you just kind of give up and you said, you know, we need to talk about this in person someday.
Here we are. Long awaited.
This is the closest we're going to get, I think. And we're dragging Rachel and Alex into it. You know, this is my second time watching it. Alex, this is your first time watching it, but you are aware of the show and most of the characters. Rachel, have you watched it as many times as Ryan? Or
Oh, definitely not as many times as Ryan. But I was thinking about that question last night when we were watching it. Because it's the first time I've watched this version of it. But I think this was my 4th time watching it in total.
That's a lot more than me. That's twice. as many as me. All right, director's edition. I honestly, I was watching it and I couldn't tell like what the differences were from the movie I watched 4 years ago. So I might have watched this one. Like maybe I watched the director's edition the first time.
There is a thing. I don't know where you guys watched it, but from what I understand, is in 2022 they did a proper restoration restoration of this, like a 4K version of this, which you can buy, and then they put that on streamers where they updated some of the special effects, tuned in, like fixed some of the audio a bit, and just kind of touched things up to what was left from Robert Wise's vision of the movie. Because in the early 2000s, he came back and did this director's edition because he wanted to fix up some stuff, make it line up a bit more, as they always do. And although it's a little bit longer than the theatrical cut, a lot of the stuff you read about the differences are mainly cut this down, just change this reaction shot to this reaction shot. Like, there's not too much in the ways of like a grand, here's a completely different version of the movie in comparison to, say, the director's edition or cut of Wrath of Khan, which has quite a lot of differences. This is mainly just little touches. And then, yes, a couple of years ago, probably after you watched it, they did a proper upscaling of this and real touching up and restoration of it, which is what we watched, and it looked pretty good.
So they never shot the scene where you see Bones shaving.
No.
That was always something that... Okay.
Gotta leave that for the imagination, for the fanfic writers out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, final question before we get into quotes. Do you own this? Do you own the special edition, or do you own like a classic from back in the day? Or
yeah, I owned a classic DVD version of this from back in the day, but with many of the Star Treks, they were things watched through television. Quite costly to own Star Trek because there's just so much of it. If you want to buy a season of Star Trek on physical media, even today, quite pricey. But at the same time, they're 26-episode seasons. And so if you want to buy a whole series, it's quite a chunk of change. And same with the movies as well. And as we've already discussed, there's always little tinkering and updating of these movies because Star Trek is such a beloved franchise, so much cherished, that pretty much most of these movies have some different version of them. Or, now we've got to have the Blu-ray version. Oh, no, but now we have a second Blu-ray. Oh, no, now we have a HD DVD. Oh, no, now we have 4K. And I'm sure, Alex, you know truly how much of a hassle it can be to be a lover and buyer of physical media, not just price-wise, but also just how much stuff does change up.
Yeah, that's been a big point of discussion with Jimmy Cam's recent 4K upscales. I haven't gotten a 4K player yet. I'm pretty content with Blu-rays for the time being. I already have Oppenheimer and Way of Water on Blu-ray, 4K. So whenever I up the stakes, I got the bases covered already.
Admiral, we have just finished 18 months redesigning and refitting the Enterprise. How in the name of hell do they expect me to have it ready in 12 hours?
Take me over, please.
Star Trek: The Motion Picture released December 79, right there in the holiday season. Of course, it is a movie about space released in the mid to late 70s. So what is going to be on its poster? There is no comparison, because I'm sure people were immediately like, oh, it's like Star Wars, even though Star Trek had been a series at this point. Whatever the case, 52% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that comes from an aggregate of 58 reviews. And then we have a sad green tipped over popcorn bucket from the Popcornometer with over 50,000 reviews at 42%. So the audience score actually lower than the critical consensus here. And I think the divisive reaction to this movie will provide much of the discussion in part 2. But for the purposes of right now, Julio, which reviews did you pull for us?
All right, I got 3 rotten quotes just to represent those angry critics that were disappointed with the first outing of the Enterprise on the big screen. I'm going to start with Zaki Hassan from Zaki's Corner, who says, the first earnest attempt to foster large-scale public interest in a moribund property that had survived up to that point solely on the enthusiasm of its small, devoted following. I guess there was a time before all of us were even really analyzing media where Star Trek was not this massive global thing that was instantly recognized. And that's when this movie came out.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear somebody just say, yeah, this was their first attempt.
I'm sorry too. Let's not skip over the fact that Star Trek is considered to be one of the first ever shows that was so popular with fans that fans brought it back on air because they wanted it so much. Small devoted, enough to do something unprecedented in the history of television at that point, or at least be one of the examples of that we still point to today. Yeah, sure. Whatever.
I have a question, and this, obviously it's before the movie, but that's the show. You've seen the entire series, both of you, I'm sure. So
yeah.
It ends, it has a proper ending, right? And then this movie happens?
No.
So it got cancelled after the second series, and then the letter writing campaign and so on and so on and so on happens. Many moving parts to how it came back, but it does come back. The third and last series comes out, and it's cheaper. There's a lot less budget for things, but that means also a lot more imagination involved. But eventually it also gets canned on a rather terrible last episode as well. The third season of Star Trek is considered the worst of the original series, as we call it now. Back then it was just Star Trek. But it died on this terrible episode about Kirk and a woman swap bodies. So you get to see William Shatner acting like a crazy lady. So that's very fun. I enjoy that episode because it's terribly fun.
It's so funny, though.
It is very funny. It's so good.
Just the sexism that pours out of that episode.
And Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, even admits that it was a mistake because in that episode, their statement was, no women can become Starfleet captains, which obviously was retconned and changed. In between that and this movie was Star Trek the Animated Series. They wanted to keep the show alive and in people's memories and at the forefront, so they struck up a deal to do an animated version of this. That was a Saturday morning cartoon that was 30 minutes long or 25-minute long episodes. A lot of the writers came back, so you get a lot of classic Star Trek writers writing the show. You get most of the actors come back to do voices, or at least the primary ones. You get Shatner, you get Leonard Nimoy, James Doohan, and so on, DeForest Kelley. The only one they didn't get was Walter Koenig, Chekhov himself. He's one of the ones that didn't get to come back because they didn't want to pay for him, that type of deal. But he got to write an episode, so there's that. And then in between that and this, there was what they call Star Trek Phase 2, in which Gene Roddenberry had a new Star Trek series in mind, in which it was a new crew of the Enterprise. And I won't get into all the nitty gritty because all the nerds out there know that, but a lot of Phase 2 is put into this movie, including the character of Ilea, for instance. So yeah, that's kind of like the history of how we got here.
But is there a point, like, I guess the animated series ends in a place that's where we pick up? Because when we pick up here, it's, we never
finished the 5-year mission. So in Star Trek, they say we're on a 5-year mission, we never finish it.
Skips forward. Yeah. Because it's just like, Kirk is going to become an admiral. He's a very competent captain. That's the career trajectory he's very clearly on. So when we reunite with him and he's an admiral, but he's choking at the bit to get back out there in space, it's like, yep.
With all of these original series movies, you can understand that there's a running continuity from the show as well as themselves. But I would say one of the strengths is you can pick up one of these movies and just watch them and understand because they give you enough of the groundwork to follow along. You can just watch Star Trek 4 without having seen Star Trek 3. You can watch Star Trek 6 without having seen Star Trek 2. You know what I mean? And yet, if you have watched all of this stuff, there's great pleasure in the kind of ethos and continuity of it all. But that's how these movies operated. This film had to understand the audience knew Star Trek well enough, but didn't have to stress out too much about it. So, and even your question, this movie is about getting the band back together in large part as well.
It definitely feels like that. One of my notes is Kirk just wants to get the band back together. Next quote, Brian Eggert from Deep Focus Review says, the film lacks almost every joyous attribute carried by the television show, regardless of its technical merits. Alex, were you surprised by how grim this movie was?
Given the immediate comparison to Star Wars, which was, it had only been A New Hope, Empire hadn't come out yet, and A New Hope, with the exception of Obi-Wan dying, is a pretty uplifting movie. So I don't know if it's in my notes anywhere, but at one point I just remember thinking to myself, like, boy, this surely was ambitious, both tonally and in execution. So we've talked about that though in the other Star Trek movies. They tap in sometimes to emotions that don't really exist in the other big space epics. But yeah, for the first time at bat, maybe just play some t-ball for a little bit. Wait till the third or fourth installation to get into this idea of sacrifice and shit.
But not joyous. Did they not see the 6-minute sequence of them gazing lovingly at the Enterprise? Pretty joyous to me. And would you be surprised to hear that this took more influence from 2001 than it did Star Wars?
Yes, I would not be surprised to hear that.
You can definitely tell because they have Douglas Trumbull doing the effects, who did the effects on that. Not surprised at all. No, of course not. And as you said, Star Trek taps into these emotions that some of the others don't. This is what many people love about Star Trek is it's a sci-fi that's, very cerebral in a lot of ways, very much about like, here's this interesting sci-fi premise and here's these very specific sets of characters having to deal with it.
I think that the lack of joy might have been a reaction to it not being, I think, anywhere near as campy. Can't be good, can't be bad, whichever way you want it, as the original series sometimes feels. I've only seen a handful of episodes from the original series, but you just told me, like, the last episode of that show was Kirk swapping bodies with a woman. And it's jarring to go from that story idea to this really very serious exploration of, an existential crisis. I consider it an upgrade, but apparently Brian Eggert, I guess he wanted the big screen version of just the TV show. I mean, this is just Star Trek all grown up. I think that's not a bad thing. But those are the quotes. Alex, take us into Contrarians Corner.
So the movie starts before we even get to the Paramount signature. We get like the
overture.
Well, did you mention who did the music?
The music was by Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah, one of the great music composers as well. And so if you're going to have Jerry here, you might as well open your movie with just a little bit of a treat for us all, which is letting him do his thing.
Yeah, it's basically the opening of Spaceship Earth at Epcot. You just start the ride just staring up at the stars gazingly. And then we get the Paramount logo. The signature hits the screen. And then we finally get into it. And it is the 23rd century, in which a Starfleet monitoring station, Epsilon 9, detects an alien entity hidden in a massive cloud of energy moving through space and towards Earth. The cloud easily destroys 3 Klingon warships and Epsilon 9 on its course. On Earth, the Starship Enterprise is undergoing a major refit. Its former commanding officer, James T. Kirk, has been promoted to Admiral. Starfleet Command assigns Enterprise to intercept the cloud entity, as the ship is the only one within range, requiring its new systems to be tested in transit. I kid you not, that's the fucking first 40 minutes of the movie.
Because the first 40 minutes is filled with beautiful character bits.
There's the joy.
Yeah.
Spock has a Liam Gallagher haircut. That's the main thing I remember from the opening of this.
Yes. The Star Trek nerds will need to have this said, but this is the first iteration of what would become the iconic Klingon design. They looked very different in the original series. This is much more in line with how we know them to look nowadays. And the lead Klingon captain was played by Mark Leonard, who played Spock's father, Sarek, as well. So he was one of their go-to guys of, you should play the first of something. He was the first Romulan, they liked him so much that they brought him back as Spock's father because he was very good. And then here he is as one of the first new iterations of the Klingons and one of the first to speak the Klingon language that we also know about now.
And then he gets killed. Like the Klingons get brought in just to show us how badass this new threat is. Because the Klingons coming out of the original series, were they like the main villains in the original show?
They were recurring, yeah. They were the main, like, they were the Russians, basically. You know, like, we're in a Cold War. Anything could go off with them right now.
It was far too episodic to say that anyone, like, one race or one thing was the main antagonist. Yeah, like, there was a sense of a Cold War between the Federation and the Klingons.
So now that's how you establish that this is something we need to take seriously. You open with the Klingons, and then the Klingons are wiped out right away, and then you cut to Captain Kirk. Like the entire time I'm watching this movie, especially on this rewatch, I was trying to put myself in the mindset of somebody watching it in the 70s, somebody who had grown up watching the show. Maybe now that I know, maybe also following the animated series or whatever. But this is now they're seeing Star Trek on the big screen for the first time, and they have to adjust to the fact that I guess all the characters have gotten older, and apparently now that you've told me that it's not like this was a very smooth lead in from the end of the show, like they also have to come to grips with where they are in their lives, and so Kirk's no longer the captain, and Spock has exiled himself to Vulcan, trying to pass his final test, and McCoy hasn't shaved in like 10 years. I mean, I think that's exciting. That's like catching up with your old pals. That was like, that's what we did in the last few Star Wars movies. So it's just like, oh, now that's Luke and now that's Han. And then you get the Enterprise, which I'm assuming is somewhat different from what you saw on the show.
Of course, and they put it in the story as well that it's different from what we knew. It's different from what Kirk knew as well. So we're on the back foot, like how Kirk is on the back foot. And just to really illustrate this point about what you're saying, think of the cinematography for the introductions of the beloved characters. Most of them are just very uncinematic. They're very much like, here's Spock. There he is. You're halfway through his story. Like, he's doing this ceremony to get rid of his emotions. There's no glory shots.
His life has continued. You're just checking in.
But Kirk, he's us. He wants to come back to Star Trek, and he wants it to be the glorious thing it is. So when we introduce him, you get the classic, like, golden shot of, like, the camera swoops up, and there he is. The door opens, and music plays, and he swaggers in like, yes, we're back to Star Trek. And he's so looking forward to everything being the way it was, and you get the perfect cut of him, William Shatner giving the most content look on his face as he goes up the turbo lift to the bridge. Hard cut to people are yelling. We get this unflattering shot of the new bridge of the Enterprise as there's wires and garbage all over the place because they're making a new one. And there's just this constant battle in the movie of what you're talking about, Julio, of the viewer as well as some of the characters are longing for what we used to have and then the reality of what we have now, which is you can't go back. You can't go back to the 60s show. This is the new thing now, and you have to just wrestle with that for the whole entire movie.
But there is, I think that it's funny that contrast of what Kirk wants, what the audience wants, and what's really happening. But there's also just the, I think, inherent beauty of seeing the Enterprise depicted in a bigger scale than what we were used to, what audiences were used to. Alex, you're a big like practical effects guy, so this must have really filled you with powerful emotions, just seeing these never-ending shots of just these models, and that there was no CGI there. It was just they might as well constructed a real spaceship to just photograph it that way. But that was this is Robert Wise just having a good time, letting us all in, letting us soak it in. And it works. I mean, I've seen, most of the Star Treks out there. I'm familiar with the ships, but I was still kind of taken aback by how the movie was loving on this ship. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, it looked great, obviously. And it's one of those things of like constantly had to keep thinking to myself of how awesome this probably looked in the movie theater. Late 70s, few bong rips, going to watch this. It's probably, that's a lot of what the appeal of the original Star Wars was. People just saw it like, holy shit. And I can see that, especially this big ship reveal and eventually the taking off that we do. Y'all can help me out here. Moving along, as citing his experience, Kirk uses his authority to take command of the ship, angering Captain Willard Decker, who has been overseeing the refit as its new commanding officer. Now, Decker here, played by disgraced former television star.
I was going to say disgraced is the word you need to use, yes.
Yes.
Stephen Collins, who was I think for most people in my age range, the dad on Seventh Heaven would be what you recognize him from. But yeah, fuck that guy. But the Willard Deckard character here, was this a character on the show or was Homeboy made for the movie?
He's new.
He's new. Most of the only people who are from the old show are like the crew that Kirk is like happy to see. He's never met Decker before. He's just
they're really happy to see him.
Happy to see him. Pretty much anyone who's not happy to see him, like properly happy to see him, like Decker or Ilea, they're the new people. Like Chekhov, Uhura, Sulu, Nurse Chapel, Bones, and of course Spock. They're the ones from the show. The only one that's like a cool little wink is the transporter chief lady is Yeoman Rand, who many know for her iconic big beehive hairdo from the original.
And Dr. Chapel.
I said Chapel.
Did you say
Chapel.
Chapel?
Yeah. She's a doctor now.
Yes.
So,
She's a doctor now. Yeah,
who's
I saw
played
that.
by Gene Roddenberry's wife, who's also the voice of the computer in all of Star Trek as well. So that's fun.
All due respect, sir, I hope this isn't some kind of Starfleet pep talk. I'm really too busy.
I'm taking over the center seat, Will.
You're what?
I'm replacing you as captain of the Enterprise.
I like the Decker character. Like you said, let's just separate the actor from the character. But this is such a good foil for Kirk because I feel bad for him. That's what makes the experience of watching this movie so complicated. I think that he shows himself to be a fairly capable officer. And here comes Captain Kirk, just boots him off the captain's chair, demotes him, so to speak, to
no, it's a quite literally demotion.
That's right. Yeah, he tells him you're temporarily.
Because he's like, you're temporarily a commander, not a captain.
And you'll be science officer because my Vulcan science officer died horrifically in the transporter a moment ago. Whatever came back didn't live very long, I was told, which is one of the most horrifying lines I've ever heard in my life. And the way it's delivered is eerily cold.
Merciful. That addition.
Yeah, it mercifully didn't live very long. It was like, yeah. So yeah, he not only gets demoted, he also gets a new job thrown on top of him. So you're right. Kirk is really sandbagging him.
Alex, what do you think of this guy? He's, we haven't seen him in any other Star Trek movies. We know why after we watch this one. So did he make as good an impression on you as he did on me?
I thought he just existed to like be annoying and to make Shatner look cool. Because, yeah, I guess he kind of is the hero in the end. And you know me, I'm a hopeless romantic. I can always dig the idea of someone doing everything they can for the person they love. But I thought he was just there to be like the stuck up, the dean to Shatner's cool kid on campus.
Maybe this is because I side with the authority figures. I thought that he made Shatner look bad. I think, and that's good. Like I enjoyed that in the movie, that Shatner's our hero in the sense that we know him and he's the main character in Star Trek. But his interactions with Deckard just reveal how petty he is and how selfish and self-centered, and that's throughout the entire movie. He's constantly either checking himself or crossing a line whenever he responds to him, whenever he interacts with him. So I am Team Deckard. How about you guys? Rachel, Ryan, do you have an allegiance when it comes to these two?
I am I'm somewhere in the middle. Because there are points where Decker is right and there are points where Kirk is right. So really, I'm on Bones' side.
That was my answer. Good one. Why are you on Bones' side? Why is that the logical choice?
Because he's just like, hey, Kirk, you don't actually know everything and you're a little bit out of touch, and that's okay. You need to be realistic about what you can do and what you know. And you have weirdly pulled rank on this guy, so of course he's gonna be pissed at you. But also, like, act your damn age, you fool.
I find I'm in agreement here. Bones is really the key that unlocks it, because in the beginning, we are just so enamored with Kirk because he's our lead. He's William Shatner, who's giving this eccentric performance. And as Alex said, Alex is completely in the frame of mind that the movie wants you to be in, where Decker is the kind of stuck-up guy who's really in Kirk's face and maybe unreasonably, but as we see throughout the course of the movie and through Bones's perspective, Decker is trying to do his best, and he knows more. He's been on this ship long now for this period of time. He knows the new run of things. He knows the technology. He's been in space. The best way to equate this is Kirk is that person who has now become like a regional manager, and they've come back and they're trying to tell you how to run things, but they don't know how to do it anymore because they haven't been actually in the thick of it for 5 years, you know? And so you can understand the frustration on all sides because we want to love Kirk. But the thing that I love, truly adore, is William Shatner's performance. He keeps riding the line of Kirk knows he's fucking it up. He knows in like deep to his core that he is wrong, but he can't show that, because if he actually acknowledges it, that means that he has to give control to someone else, and that his time is really over with this. And as we said, this is about him trying to recapture the glory days, and that includes
he's too
being in the
much of
chair.
a control freak.
He's too much of a control freak, and too much of someone who is wanting things to return to yesteryear.
Fine. Team Bones then. A third team emerges. Here, you're the third party candidate. We'll vote for Bones when both Decker and Kirk fail us.
Bonestein over here. Testing of Enterprise's new systems go poorly. 2 officers, including the ship's Vulcan science officer Sonequa, are killed by a malfunctioning transporter, and improperly calibrated engines nearly destroy the ship. Kirk's unfamiliarity with the ship, this is Ryan's point here, and the ship's new systems increase the tension between he and Decker, who has been temporarily demoted to commander and first officer. Commander Spock arrives as a replacement science officer, explaining that while on his home world undergoing a ritual to purge himself of emotion, he felt a consciousness that he believes emanates from the cloud, making him unable to complete the ritual because his human half felt an emotional connection to it. So this is basically somehow Palpatine returned. This is just somehow Spock is back in the fray, because he has to be. It's a Star Trek movie. You got to have Spock up there to play off. You got to have Leonard Nimoy to play off of William Shatner. And I don't care if people are annoyed by like the plot device to get him back. I just want him back. And now he's back. And now it feels like a Star Trek movie. Get Whitey out of the way here. Stephen Collins. Let's have some Spock and Kirk action.
But the best part of it is you want that, and then Spock comes on board and he just doesn't want to do it. Like, you're like, yay, great, we've got Spock back. And even Uhura's just like, that's how we feel. And he just turns his back on her and just goes into the lift, because Spock's like, yes, I'm here, but I'm embarrassed to be back. Like, he is Leonard Nimoy. Like, Leonard Nimoy infamously wrote some autobiographies called I Am Not Spock, and then I Am Spock, when he came to terms with being Spock. And this is in that era of just like, I'm here. In the next movie, I hope they kill me. It reflects well with the character and like the frustrations, because we've already got Kirk fighting with Decker. Now we have Kirk just mystified at Spock not doing the things from the show.
Yeah, he's. This is when I wrote that Kirk just wants to get the band together, because first he gives Bones that speech where he's like, "Bones, I need you," and then here Spock comes in and he also brings him over to his room and he's like, "I need you, Spock."
Bones. We need him. I need him.
then my presence is to our mutual advantage.
He's trying so hard to recapture the glory days. And Spock, yeah, he feels like he's completely over it. He's very hostile. I guess the rationale behind it is that he almost made it to the point where he was going to be completely purged from emotions. And so that's why he's just reacting so cold to them. Because, I mean, the few episodes of the original show that I've seen, he's friendlier than this, than what we see when he first arrives.
But it's been a number of years and everyone's gone into different places. It was easy enough to convince Bones because he's a very emotional guy. But even him at the start and throughout this movie...
He was drafted.
They drafted me. But even think about Bones. Throughout this movie, he literally turns his back on Kirk because he just can't tolerate his behavior. He's just like, here's my piece of advice. You do with it as you will. And he just walks off. That happens a lot throughout this movie. But yeah, you're right. Spock is a lot more cold because he was about to strip all of his emotions. But also, I think from Nimoy's performance in the first half, I think there's a level of embarrassment of having to do this because right up at the moment where he's going to get his emotions purged, his human side kicked in and said, nah, you can't do that. You've got some emotion.
He's always been embarrassed by that part of himself and ashamed of what sort of he believes to be a fault within himself, these emotions that he's inherited from his mother, and seeing that point is part of what makes where he ends up appreciating his emotions. Like, it makes it more satisfying to me.
We need the journey to really make that payoff really worth something.
And also to understand that it's not like a linear process or a binary one, that you can continue to explore the sort of grey when it comes to Spock.
Were you disappointed, Alex, that the Spock was so unfriendly when he came in? Not even a hug?
No, he's a Vulcan. He's not going to like dap him up. What do you expect him to do? They don't have a secret handshake or some shit, man. I guess they have an embrace, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kirk seems taken aback. Kirk seems like he wanted some bro time and he didn't get any.
Well, at that point in the game, he should know the score.
That's what happens when you befriend a Vulcan.
Exactly. Have they started wearing their pajamas yet? There's the part where they're...
Yes.
They have to go through the wormhole first, but then there's like the fucking Enterprise pajamas that they're just rocking.
I call them dentist outfits myself. They look like dentist outfits.
That's a good call. Kirk, though, he has like some sneakers on with it later in the movie, and it looks like his, it's casual Friday. That's what you expect him to say.
Would you be surprised to learn that the cast and crew hated these uniforms because they were extremely uncomfortable to wear and hard to get out of? And hence we have the big...
very like stiff, like very starched.
Yeah. And then they have the big red Imperial uniforms for the next set of movies.
I mean, this looks a lot more chill, which I guess you need something to look chill when the movie's just so tense and so like oppressive in its mood. I thought Pajama Party too, which was like, that's good. That's a little bit of a brotherhood here.
Enterprise intercepts the energy cloud and is attacked by an alien vessel within. A probe appears on the bridge, attacks Spock, and abducts the navigator, Ilia. Ilia? Is that how you pronounce it? Ilia. I'm sorry. I'm always,
you say abducts. Fucking murders her is a great way to describe it.
We don't know that yet.
Oh, but in the moment, it looks like that.
Yeah.
I think in the moment, everyone treats it like she died. Decker especially treats it like that's the risk.
And then once she appears, they're like, well, what did happen to you? How did you survive that is sort of the first question that they ask.
This is, again, one of the big set pieces of the effects works. You have this very strange sequence of events where it's like this beam of light comes in, like it's this electric, like this static electricity stuff happening, and they're clearly using like strobe effect and still photography and like bright lights. The actress who plays Aaliyah apparently went blind temporarily from this scene because she had to keep her eyes open for it as long as possible as they shine big bright lights in her face. So she got flash blindness for a bit of this. And I love this scene. I love this whole sequence because the speed starts to change. Like it starts to kind of go slow. And when she gets, evaporated, like disintegrated or just zapped out of there, her, like her tricorder or whatever she's holding just goes back to normal speed and it just drops on the ground. And it's very haunting. And this film is the, like, most family-friendly Star Trek film of them all. This one's rated G because there's no violence. A lot of it's implied. A lot of it's...
Only thing that shoots that asteroid.
Yeah, the Enterprise, the only time it fires a weapon is during the wormhole scene to get an asteroid out of the way. That's the only time there's any real space action from the Enterprise.
You were mentioning that they assumed that she died, and you're right. I think it's a good time to point out how professional they are in the bridge, because earlier there's I think it's when they came out of the wormhole, or maybe it's right before this probe shows up. But this is when Chekhov gets zapped and his hand is just burned, and he falls to the ground and he's screaming in agony, and everybody else keeps focused on the task at hand. It's like, if, we know that Chekhov is in pain because the camera shows us, right? And then at some point, Uhura directs the doctor to go help him. But the rest of the crew, that's how you're supposed to act.
That's not my job to deal with. So
exactly.
That's a military life.
I've got to focus on my station.
Yep. You can't afford to run to Chekhov's side and just check out his hand yourself. You just have to follow protocol, let the doctor take care of it, and you just keep flying the ship. And the first time it kind of took me aback, but then by the time that Ilea disappears, and you get a little bit of tension between Decker and Kirk. But for the most part, it's not like everybody goes in a spiral freaking out because they just lost one of their own. Instead, they just, we have to keep moving forward. What happens next?
The human race is at risk. If we start crying about Ilea disappearing, then, we're going to screw up the mission, and the mission is to save Earth.
Ilea, played by Persis Kambata, who very unique look. She was from Bombay, and I believe she was Miss India in 1965. So there you go.
Yes.
Now, with this unique look and the piercing eyes Miss Persis owns, I was thinking to myself, when they reboot Star Trek, this role is definitely in the can for Anya Taylor-Joy, I think.
Fascinating choice. She did actually shave her, unlike Anya Taylor-Joy, this actress actually did shave her head for the part. No digital trickery or bald caps. This is actually a woman with a shaved head.
I mean, she went blind. I buy that she also shaved her head.
It works for her, too. Like any human, the shaved head look can work, or sometimes it can't, but works for her.
My oath of celibacy is on record, Captain. May I assume my duties?
By all means.
I was going to say, though, that she has my favorite moment in all 2 hours and 17 minutes of this picture. And that is right before the Enterprise takes off. They're like on the runway. And it's being acknowledged now that she and Decker have a past. And she was kind of dismissive of his when he says hello or whatever, but now they're all in position, they're about to leave, and there's just like brief cutaway where she looks at him and she smiles, and he looks at her and he smiles. And I like it because it's just it feels like a genuine moment exchange between two people that have a past relationship. But also on rewatch, knowing how the movie ends, it really carries a lot more weight, because she's got to be gone halfway through the movie, and then probably the memory of this smile is something that drives his actions towards the end. So I really like it. And it's just so, if you're watching the movie for the first time, you might not even notice. But on rewatch, I really liked it.
Yeah, and it gets kind of called back to in the end when the drone version of her is giving him that kind of longing look, and he gives a smile back and the magic of cinema, I'm a romantic too, and I love a good romance in movies, and a huge factor of making the audience buy in to something in a relatively quick amount of time. There's so many things that factor into it, such as a shot of them smiling. It's simple and effective, but to me, what really is the heart of their romance is the music. Jerry Goldsmith's Ilea theme is very sweet and very eclectic and very romantic. And so oftentimes when we get the moments between them, what's really reinforcing their relationship and making us buy it is the little musical cues that they put in.
Her theme song that she runs down to the ring to.
Yes.
Yeah, the music in this, in addition to this movie just looking gorgeous, the music is fantastic. I agree with that wholeheartedly. Vigur, what's her alter ego now? I forget how they
V'ger. V'ger is the master.
I'm reading my notes here. I'm sorry. I'm like reading it phonetically.
Come on, carbon unit, get it together.
We are carbon-based units. This is true. Ilea is replaced by a robotic replica sent by the Entity to study the carbon units on the ship. Decker is distraught over the loss of Ilea, with whom he had a romantic history, and becomes troubled as he attempts to extract information from the doppelganger, which has Ilea's memories and feelings buried inside. Spock takes an unauthorized spacewalk to the vessel's interior and attempts a telepathic mind meld with it. In doing so, he learns that the entire vessel is V'ger, a non-biological living machine. This part is fucking awesome. This is like Tron and Star Wars all mixed into one here.
And 2001 especially.
And 2001.
Obviously, yeah. Massive missed opportunity here with William Shatner not saying, "I'm afraid I can't let you do that, Spock." That would have been fantastic as he attempts to leave. We're around the point in this movie where Bones wants to like spank the probe. He's talking about what you do to punish a child. It's a pretty fascinating. It's one of those things when the words on the paper probably don't seem that outlandish, but in delivery here, it's a very memorable part of the film.
So I wrote in my notes, Spock goes rogue, which is, I mean, it's only like 10 minutes of the movie or something, but the idea that arguably the most dangerous member of the crew would go rogue, and I know that that's something that's being explored maybe on the TV shows a little bit, but he very easily dispatches the security guy that's, he just do the Vulcan grip thing, and then he just takes some equipment and goes out for a spacewalk and goes on his own acid trip.
I mean, this whole sequence is really fucking cool when he kind of pieces it all together and figures out what's going on. And that the Entity is a Voyager 6, a NASA ship.
Yeah, that comes at the end. That's an end twist of the movie. At
That's
this
a big
point,
reveal.
they just confirmed it's a machine because she kept talking about it like it was its creator, its master. They're like, oh, it's an alien. It's an alien race. It's a ship. So someone's in the ship, of course. And then Spock realizes that it is, in fact, a mechanical life form of some sort that's become alive. What does that mean? And so we have to really come to terms with that. Oh, I love how this still looks. We say back in the day, this is still very, very impressive visually. Yes, this movie has a lot of effects and visuals that don't work, that are stand out, but for every one of those, there's like 10 things that still make your jaw hit the floor. And this whole sequence is very great. There's just so much here, so much creativity as well. I love all of these planets that are just stored inside of this thing, and it is it's just a cacophony of visuals here, and yet it goes beyond the point of it being so hectic for us, the viewer. It turns around to kind of being weirdly serene as we're inside of V'ger's whole entire thing. Like during the sequence and for the rest of the movie, you get a lot of crazy stuff happening visually, but then at a certain point, you reach an equilibrium where it's kind of ambient after a certain point.
I mean, Robert Wise is doing what he did at the beginning of the movie. He's just letting us soak it in. It doesn't rush it. It's just taking Spock on this trip, and we're going along, and we're just slowly absorbing it. Rachel, I don't want to go past the fact that when they bring back Ilea, right? Like she materializes in a shower, and then
the sonic shower is running.
Yes,
and then all of a sudden she's in a robe and heels.
Yes,
it's very, very sexual. Her look, not just the legs, but just there's something very vaginal going on here. It is like a little, I'm not joking. This movie's very sexual. Spock went inside of the orifice, they call it at one point.
Yeah,
then he
they
says
do.
aperture.
Yeah.
There's a scene in which they're looking at Ilea like on the bed in the sick bay, and they're just going over all of the moisture inside of her and all of this stuff, and she's just sitting there.
Even down to eye moisture.
Well, I thought it was cute that they had kind of set up a play date between her and Deckard. They tell Deckard, look, she seems to have her memories from Ilea, so our best way to figure out what Beecher is up to is you go and you try to seduce it out of this probe, and Deckard is game, and so that's where like I think everything comes together, right? Like they've established that Deckard had strong feelings for Ilea, and then they send back. We find ourselves with a spy probe that looks like Ilea but sexed up, and then you throw Deckard in there to do recon and to try to outsmart this probe that looks like the woman he loved, but also with sexy clothing. I mean, it all builds up to where, of course, the choice that he makes at the end of the movie, that was the only choice he was ever going to make.
Within you are the memory patterns of a certain carbon unit. If I can help you to revive those patterns, you could understand our functions better.
That is logical.
And there's the question of, is any of this her because it's absorbed her? Like she's data inside of it now, and it's the classic thing you see of artificial intelligence, of like what constitutes being alive, what constitutes being someone else. Like if you upload your consciousness into a thing, is that you, or is it just the constructs of memory? And so his connection with her starts to make the drone more like Ilea, thus more reasonable. But the end of, as you said, the play date comes to, right, well, I'm back to drone version, and if you people don't do what I need, then you're in trouble. But even if you do succeed, you'll all just be turned into data for me and die. So that's your fate. You're parasites, so get to it. And that's why, there's extra stakes on board, because, as much as Ilea, the drone, is becoming more and more the person we saw before and there's connections, we're reminded harshly, this isn't her either. This is just a part of the threat. It just has a face we know now.
At this point, they're so close to planet Earth. Kirk has gone from giving updates every few hours to now giving updates every couple minutes. It's like weird. He keeps telling Scotty to figure shit out because they're like 4 hours from Earth. 3 hours from Earth. When the first time I watched this movie, I thought the reveal of what was really going on was pretty genius. I think I was caught up on the fact of how surprising it was, and I didn't really embrace the emotional part of it. Alex, how did you feel when you find out what V'ger really was? Did you feel sad for this little probe that went out on a mission and came back with self-awareness and just wanting to find the meaning of life?
Oh yeah, the part where I believe it's Spock when he's explaining like what it wants and has that line of "Is this all that I am?" Yeah, that is difficult. This movie is from what 45 years ago, and is posing a question that was still relevant then. It's relevant in the future when this movie happens, and that's like a concept and an emotion that I can relate to, especially when you get older. That's something you think about a lot. And, going from non-consciousness kind of to that is a big leap. And I felt bad for our probe friend here.
And it banks on Leonard Nimoy's performance in that scene in the medbay where he's holding Kirk's hand and he's expressing like, this is what V'ger wants to know. This is what it doesn't understand.
Yeah, and it can't yet.
And it can't. And I, Spock, was going to give all of this up. Like, I was taking this for granted. And you see him have a big smile on his face and start to well up with emotion. And Kirk is taken aback too. Like, he's so happy, he's embracing Spock, but at the same time, this isn't the Spock we've been spending time with the last hour or so.
It's far from the Spock that refused to sit.
It is one of the big showcases of the character of Spock and Leonard Nimoy's performance. This is, in the fan base, one of the big scenes of this movie. If you take anything away as a Trekkie from the motion picture, it is the theme song, of course, which gets reused for Star Trek The Next Generation, and this scene of Spock, because it is just kind of the embodiment of their friendship and relationship. And yes, I'll even say it, for the shippers out there, the people who, you know, think about the Kirk-Spock relationship far more romantically or sexually, this is just one of the big tentpoles of that, to the point in which very recently, like within the last little bit of time of this recording, there was a Star Trek short film put out that involves William Shatner and Robin Curtis and a bunch of Trek people. I think it was official as well, that reuses some of this scene to have a beautiful send-off for Kirk and Spock, where the short film's premise is, as Kirk is dying in Generations, he goes through this magical journey of reconnecting with Spock, because one of the things that Trekkies hate about Kirk's death is he dies without any of his friends around. He dies with Captain Picard over there. It's like, Picard's not his friend.
Yeah,
we don't give a fuck about.
It's just like, it would be better if he was literally alone.
But this scene of it was.
But no, he's with Captain Picard on a bridge,
who he's met for like 10 minutes of the movie. It's like, okay, they're not friends. They might know each other now, but that's not enough. But yeah, this scene of the hands embracing is one of the images. And yeah, as much as you want to humanize the probe, why it works is because it is Spock. Spock is very much in tandem with what V'Ger is about, but he is alive. Like, he is someone that has the abilities for these emotions that V'Ger just can't yet. And he was about to throw it all away.
You learn a new thing every day, and today I learned that this scene is basically the starting point for all the Kirk Spock / fiction.
Oh, I didn't say starting point.
No, not starting. No. You're mistaken there. You're mistaken there.
Oh boy, you've got to watch the original show where they give each other the fuck me eyes every episode.
It was just a little bit of kerosene on the fire.
It was kerosene on the fire. Oh yeah, it's a big image.
It wasn't the spark.
I'll tell you what.
That fire was lit.
I'll tell you what. One of the big first images in my mind is there's an episode, this is true, where Kirk is like, ooh, my back is sore, and one of the yeomans, one of the women, starts massaging his back, and he sees Spock walk past him, and he gives Spock a look, and then he turns around to see the woman, and he's confused because he thought it was Spock giving him a massage. That happened in the show.
I love it. Alex, what do you think of Captain Kirk's very manly, very hairy arms in full display during the third act of this movie?
I mean, Shatner really was a embodiment of masculinity, I think, especially the sci-fi style.
Yeah, he wore the girdle like all men do.
Gender affirming care, Ryan. It's gender affirming.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, so the twist here. Well, first, I have my note just says Captain Kirk plays a game of chicken with a machine. He gets in a staring contest with new Ilea, and he tells her
he's established as being like a toddler. So
spank it.
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna play a logic game and lose.
It is a recurring thing that Captain Kirk would talk computers to death. It happened like 5 times in the show that he would outlogic a computer and it would spark out. So this is a furthering of that, and the computer just basically says, no,
I'm not falling for that one.
Well, Mr. Decker, it seems my bluff has been called.
I'm afraid our hand is pretty weak, Captain.
Yeah, so in line with the twist, this NASA probe was found by an alien race of living machines that interpreted its programming as instructions to learn all that can be learned and return that information to its creator. They upgraded the probe to fulfill its mission, and on its journey, it gathered so much knowledge that it achieved sentience. Spock discovers that V'Ger lacks the ability to give itself purpose other than its original mission. Having learned everything it could on its journey home, it finds its existence meaningless. Before transmitting all its information, V'ger insists that the creator come in person to finish the sequence. The Enterprise crew realizes humans are the creator. And this is where, don't let him fool you. He's no hero. Stephen Collins, Decker, offers himself to V'ger. He merges with the Ilea probe and V'ger, creating a new life form that disappears into space. So, is this heroic, Julio?
I think that the bigger question is, did he evolve into the next level of being, or did he just die? And
he leveled up.
He leveled up.
They talk about it as a birth.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but the survivors talk about it as a birth.
Not a casualty. Missing.
Yeah, he's missing.
Yeah, he's missing.
Conveniently, the one guy that was a threat to Captain Kirk keeping the captain's chair in the Enterprise disappears in this final mission. And
but his
tell
own
themselves,
career
well,
is also a liability in that. Like, he's an admiral.
Mm-hmm.
Admirals are back at home, not out on the front.
Yeah.
I forgot the one part of this big climax. I, of course, remember the reveal of it being Voyager 6, which is not a real probe. We never got up to Voyager 6. But
just give Elon Musk some time.
God, Julio, come on.
Don't invoke him.
Come on, he's going to be your next president soon. Give him a chance. So, as I was saying, I really like the reveal, but one thing I forgot was you have the moment where it's like, okay, we've sent through the transmission and everything should be fine. And it's like, no, the physical insides of this is broken because it broke it on purpose, because it wants the creator here. It wants to meet its creator. It doesn't want to just do this through email. It wants to be touched by its creator, which is probably the things that made me the most emotionally sensitive to this entity. Like, I appreciate V'ger as like a very, with sci-fi, there's a lot of concepts like you appreciate it on a very thought-provoking level, but this pushed it to a more of an emotional reaction on my part. Like, I already liked what Spock was doing in the previous scene, but just this extra little touch of like, it's not only here to perform its function, it wants something.
Yes,
it actually wants something, not just here to do the job.
Part of it being sentient.
Yeah.
Is that it has its own desires, and Spock points out it's got questions.
And in case people are listening to this and they've never seen the movie, when one imagines you get the premise of it's become sentient, you would imagine there's a lot of humanizing things or a lot of obvious displays of emotion, even compare it to 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Hal clearly has a lot of emotions and clearly has a lot of things it's thinking about, and that's represented through the voice acting and through the eye and through the camera moves. But this V'ger doesn't have any of that. Like, yes, Ilea exists, but this moment is sold through pure action, and that's what's really impressive about it is we don't have a lot of the conventional trappings to make us understand on a visual level as well as others that it has sentience. But this is one of those moments where it's like, yeah, in case you really didn't get it, this isn't just one of those AIs that have gone super intelligent where you wonder, is it alive or not? This is really one moment where it's like, it wants to meet the thing that made it, to understand why it's like this in the first place. And the fun of that is there's the crew of the Enterprise looking at each other being like, gee whiz, we did it and we don't know the meaning of anything. So what are we going to do?
Yeah, and only Willard Deckard steps up to the plate and says, well, if nobody else will do it, I will. Alex, you called it out. Dude. You're romantic, so you really agree with this decision? You're fully behind the sacrifice?
Absolutely. It makes this movie feel like is this movie referenced in any of the others? I can't remember. I've seen Wrath of Khan numerous times, but like I'm trying to remember if like this Decker character is mentioned again or if he's just a bottle character.
No, there's a lot of references to the motion picture in other ways. As I said, the score by Jerry Goldsmith gets repurposed throughout a lot of Star Trek, in which, for people like myself, Rachel and Julio, the main theme of this music, it's kind of jarring to be like, oh yeah, that's right, this came before Star Trek The Next Generation, because that's the theme of Star Trek The Next Generation. But many other components do kind of bleed through, but no, not quite directly. Literally, the next upcoming Star Trek TV movie, Section 31, starring Michelle Yeoh, coming back after winning an Oscar. She wants to come back for some reason. Has a Deltan character for, I think, the first time since this movie. So we'll have another woman that plays the same race as Ilea. So there's little winks and nods to it. One of the things, as you will note, is the poster of this movie gets replicated a lot by Star Trek. Star Trek Beyond, specifically, pretty much does its version of the motion picture poster. And I gotta say, it's my favorite Star Trek movie poster. It is one where you look at it and you go, oh, I want to watch that movie. That looks interesting.
So if you're wondering what was the legacy of of Willard Deckard, not too far beyond the end of the motion picture. He was, but I mean, I guess he evolved and he's better than all of us. So he doesn't need the callbacks. As you like to say, Alex, he Dr. Manhattan himself at the end of this movie. And that was it. I am done with Star Trek. I move on to Seventh Heaven.
Well, someone we would be familiar with to this very day is obviously William Shatner as James T. Kirk. He takes the captain's chair at the end of this movie, and honestly, in one of my favorite moments in the whole movie, it's a great character moment too, when it's asked where he wants to, set a course for. He goes,
Out there. That-a-way.
And just kind of points out into nothingness. It's a very on-brand moment for William Shatner, and a good way to end this. Again, very divisive movie, and at the time, I'm not sure contemporarily what the outlook was for the film franchise from this point, because as we'll discuss in the second half, financially and critically, it's not like this thing set the world on fire.
But it saved the world, which is more important than that.
Touche.
Definitely, there was a world that could potentially be set on fire in the future because they stopped Beecher. But that was it. That was Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Kind of would you guys call this a classic, Ryan, Rachel?
I don't know if I would go that far, because it is in a weird place within Star Trek, and I don't feel like a lot of people outside of Star Trek are going back and being like, ooh, I'm going to watch this classic.
I would say it's necessary. Not necessary in terms of like you have to watch it, but in terms of just Star Trek. This is the motion picture. This is the first of 6 films with the original crew, which is still more films than the TNG crew got. And there are people out there like, say, Alex, who have only watched the Star Trek movies and never seen the shows and enjoy them nonetheless. And so would I say it's a classic? It's hard to say what do you define as a classic, but I do say it is something to appreciate its existence for in the foundational sense of Star Trek.
Necessary. It needed to happen so that we could eventually get the J.J. Abrams take on Star Trek. I get you. I see what you're putting down, Ryan. So with that bit of wisdom, we're going to move on to real talk